When my daughter told me that my life's work should be demolished, I smiled, nodded, and made one phone call. By spring, her architectural firm was bankrupt. Her building permits were revoked, and my Chen Cultural Center was declared a historic landmark. Justice must be served, and arrogance must be corrected. You won't believe what one supposedly senile old architect can do when he stops forgetting and starts blueprinting revenge. But to understand how one phone call dismantled a $4 million design studio, you need to know about the 35 years that led to this moment. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The email arrived on November 18th at 9:47 a.m., marked urgent. Subject line: Family discussion required. S. Chen Foster. My daughter never used her full hyphenated name unless she was being formal, professional, distant. The three things she'd perfected since marrying Marcus Foster 3 years ago. I opened it standing in my home office, surrounded by architectural drawings that spanned 4 decades. The Space Needle visible through my window, a reminder that Seattle had once valued bold design over safe investments. Dad, the email began, no warmth, just efficiency. Marcus and I need to discuss the Cultural Center project. Can you meet us at the firm tomorrow at 2 p.m.? This is time sensitive. Sarah, the Cultural Center, my masterpiece. The building I designed in 1994 when Sarah was 7 years old, when architecture still meant creating spaces that served communities rather than maximizing profit margins. 29 years standing at the corner of 12th and Jackson, serving as a gathering place for Seattle's International District. Concert hall, art gallery, community meeting rooms, all wrapped in a design that honored both my Chinese heritage and the Pacific Northwest's natural beauty. Time sensitive. The phrase architects use when they're about to deliver bad news to a client. I arrived at Foster and Chen Design Studios at 1:53 p.m. the next day, 7 minutes early, as always. Punctuality was one of the few things Sarah had learned from me that Marcus hadn't managed to erase. The office occupied the entire 5th floor of a modern glass building in South Lake Union, the kind of sterile tech hub architecture that prioritized views over soul. The receptionist, a young woman who didn't recognize me despite the name on the door, asked me to wait. I sat in their lobby for 23 minutes, watching Sarah's assistant walk past 3 times without making eye contact. Power play, making the old man wait. I'd seen this move before from clients trying to establish dominance. When Sarah finally emerged, she was dressed in the Armani suits Marcus preferred. Sharp, expensive, nothing like the comfortable work clothes I'd taught her to value in architecture school. Her husband followed 2 steps behind, his Brooks Brothers blazer screaming old family money and Yale legacy admissions. Dad, thanks for coming. Sarah's hug was brief, professional, the kind you'd give a difficult contractor. Let's talk in the conference room. The space was all glass walls and Herman Miller chairs, probably $80,000 in furniture alone. I recognized the material palette, the same high-end finishes I'd seen in Marcus's family estate in Bellevue. Everything chosen to impress rather than to function. Marcus closed the door with deliberate care, then positioned himself at the head of the table. My daughter sat to his right. I was placed at the far end, the supplicant's position. They'd literally designed the seating arrangement to diminish me. Robert, Marcus began, not Dad or even Robert Chen, just my first name stripped of respect. We wanted to discuss an exciting opportunity regarding the cultural center. I said nothing, waiting. Silence was a tool I'd learned from 40 years of client presentations. Let them fill it with truth. Sarah pulled up a rendering on the conference room screen. A glass tower, 70 stories, luxury condominium starting at $2 million, where my cultural center currently stood. This is the Jackson Tower project, she explained, her voice taking on the rehearsed quality of a sales pitch. Marcus's development company has been assembling the land parcels around your building for 18 months. We have everyone's agreement except the Cultural Center Board. And you want me to convince them to sell, I said quietly. We want you to recognize reality. Marcus leaned forward, his voice carrying the condescension of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. That building is 30 years old. The mechanical systems are outdated. The design aesthetic is dated. Frankly, Robert, it's become an eyesore in a neighborhood that's finally appreciating. Eyesore. The word hit like a failed load calculation. My masterpiece, the building that had won the AIA Western Mountain Region Design Award, that had been featured in Architectural Digest, that served 1,500 community members every week, an eyesore. The Cultural Center is historic, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Sarah exchanged a glance with Marcus, some prearranged signal. Dad, historic is just another word for obsolete. Architecture evolves. What worked in 1994 doesn't work now. We need density, height, modern systems. Your building represents old thinking. Old thinking. As if 50 years of experience counted for nothing against Marcus's MBA and Sarah's 5 years in practice. The community needs that space, I said. Marcus actually laughed. The community? Dad, sorry, Robert, the International District is gentrifying. Those community members you're worried about, they're being displaced anyway. We might as well build something that serves the new demographic, people who can actually afford to live in Seattle. I looked at my daughter, at the woman I'd raised to believe architecture was about serving people, not profit. Is this what you believe, Sarah? That we should displace communities to build luxury towers? She couldn't meet my eyes. I believe in economic reality. The Cultural Center operates at a loss. The building needs $3 million in seismic upgrades. The board is looking at closing it anyway. Our offer gives them a way out with dignity and money for programming elsewhere. How much? I asked. $8.5 million for the land and building, Marcus said, sliding a folder across the table. Plus, we're offering you something special, Robert. A consulting fee of $500,000 if you help convince the board. Consider it recognition of your legacy. I opened the folder. Purchase agreement, development timeline, architectural renderings that showed my cultural center reduced to rubble. And there, on page 7, the consulting fee. $500,000 to sell out everything I'd built. This is generous, Marcus continued, especially considering your financial situation. Sarah mentioned you've been struggling since Linda's medical bills. My hands clenched on the folder. Linda, my wife of 38 years, dead 6 years from a heart attack that came without warning while I was at a planning commission meeting. The medical bills had been substantial, yes, but manageable, until I'd given Sarah $750,000 to start her firm. My financial situation is fine, I said carefully. Is it? Marcus pulled out another document. Because according to the loan you gave Sarah, you were supposed to receive quarterly payments of $15,000. She's made exactly 3 payments in 3 years. That's $630,000 you're still owed, not counting interest. I looked at Sarah. You told him about the loan? We're married. We don't keep financial secrets. Her voice carried defensive edges. And Dad, you offered that money. You insisted. You said you wanted to help me build something of my own. I did want that. I still do. Then help us with this project. She leaned forward, and for a moment I saw the daughter I remembered, the little girl who used to sit in my office and draw buildings. Dad, this is our chance to prove ourselves. Marcus's family is investing $30 million. If we deliver this project on time, we'll become the premier residential design firm in Seattle. We'll finally step out of your shadow. There it was, the real motivation. Not economics, not community needs. Shadow. My daughter wanted to destroy my masterpiece to prove she'd surpassed me. I'll think about it, I said, closing the folder. Marcus's expression hardened. We need an answer by Monday. The other board members are wavering, but they respect you. Your endorsement will close this deal. Your opposition will kill it. Then I'll give you an answer Monday. I stood to leave, but Sarah's voice stopped me at the door. Dad, one more thing. There's been some talk in the architecture community, concerns about your recent work. What concerns? She exchanged another glance with Marcus. People are saying you seem confused at events, that you've been asking about projects that were completed years ago, that maybe the stress of Linda's death and your age are catching up with you? The room tilted. Who's saying this? It doesn't matter. What matters is that we're worried about you. Marcus and I have been discussing whether it might be time to think about your future. Power of attorney, maybe assisted living, just to make sure you're taken care of. Power of attorney. They weren't just asking me to sell my building. They were building a narrative to take control of everything. My assets, my decisions, my legacy. I see, I said quietly. And this consulting fee, the concern about my well-being, all of this is happening because you care about me, not because you need my endorsement to demolish a building that's standing in the way of your luxury tower. That's not fair, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Fairness is an interesting concept from someone who owes me $630,000 and is now trying to manipulate me into destroying my life's work. I opened the door. You'll have my answer Monday. I walked out of Foster and Chen Design Studios and into the gray Seattle afternoon, my hands shaking with something between rage and grief. Around me, the city I'd helped shape over 4 decades continued its transformation into something unrecognizable. Glass towers replacing brick character, tech campuses displacing art spaces, profit over people in every design decision. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Dad, please don't be upset. We're trying to help everyone here. Think about the consulting fee. Think about your future. I deleted it and kept walking toward the cultural center, needing to see the building, to remind myself why I'd spent 2 years of my life designing it. The space looked exactly as I'd envisioned it 30 years ago. The entry plaza where elderly Chinese women practiced Tai Chi every morning. The concert hall where musicians from 12 different cultural backgrounds performed. The galleries showcasing local artists who couldn't afford Pioneer Square's commercial spaces. Every corner designed with intention, with respect for the people who would use it. I stood there for 20 minutes, watching community members flow in and out, and made my decision. Not Monday. Right now. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in 2 years, David Park, the young social worker I'd met in 1998, fresh out of college and passionate about community development. He'd asked me to design a community center in Beacon Hill, and I'd done it pro bono because I believed in his vision. That center still stood, still served hundreds of families every week. The phone rang twice before his voice answered, professional and warm. Robert Chen? Is that really you? David, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. I need your advice on a community matter. For you? Any time. What's going on? I looked up at my cultural center, at the building my daughter wanted to demolish. It's about protecting something worth saving. And David, I think some people are about to learn what happens when they confuse an old architect with a powerless one. I'm listening, he said, and I heard the smile in his voice. And Robert? For what it's worth, I'm chair of the Urban Development Commission now. I don't know if that helps, but I owe you everything, whatever you need. I smiled for the first time in hours. Then we should meet. Tomorrow, because I'm about to teach my daughter the most important architectural lesson I never got around to. The difference between legacy and liability isn't always what you think it is. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., I found myself in my home office, pulling out the original blueprints for the cultural center. Every line, every detail drawn by hand before CAD software made architecture cold and efficient. I remembered Linda bringing me coffee at midnight during the design phase, telling me this would be my masterpiece. She'd been right. I pulled out another set of documents, the loan agreement with Sarah, $750,000 transferred in 3 installments over 18 months. The last payment had gone through 2 months after Linda's funeral, when I'd been drowning in grief and desperate to give Sarah something to build her career on. She'd made 3 payments, $45,000 total. Then the excuses had started. Cash flow issues, reinvestment in the firm, Marcus's family promising to help, but the money not materializing. I'd stopped asking because I didn't want to seem like I was keeping score with my own daughter. But sitting there at 2 a.m., doing the math I'd been avoiding, the number was devastating. $705,000 still owed, plus the accumulated interest I'd been too sentimental to charge. Nearly $750,000 that Sarah and Marcus had used to build their luxury design studio while plotting to demolish my masterpiece. The sun rose on November 20th, finding me still at my desk, still calculating. Not just money anymore, but leverage. Sarah and Marcus thought they held all the cards. The loan debt as blackmail, the whisper campaign about my declining mental state, the economic pressure on the Cultural Center board. They'd built a careful strategy to back me into a corner, but they'd forgotten something fundamental about architecture. Every structure has load-bearing elements. Remove them and everything collapses. I just needed to find which walls Sarah's firm was relying on and start strategically demolishing them. My phone rang at 8:15 a.m., Marcus's number. "Robert, I wanted to follow up on yesterday's meeting. Make sure there were no hard feelings." His voice carried that false warmth of someone who needed something. Sarah's concern she came across too harsh. You know how passionate she gets about projects. "I understand passion," I said, keeping my tone neutral. Good, good. "Listen, we've been thinking about that consulting fee. What if we increased it to $750,000? Exactly what you invested in Sarah's firm. Clean slate, everybody wins. $750,000. My loan forgiven, wrapped up as payment for betraying everything I'd built. The elegance of it was almost admirable." "That's generous," I said carefully. "We think so. And Robert, about the other matter, the concerns about your well-being, we want you to know that comes from a place of love. Sarah's been devastated watching you struggle since Linda passed. Maybe it's time to let the next generation handle things while you enjoy retirement." "Maybe you're right," I said, letting a tremor into my voice that wasn't entirely performance. "It has been difficult. I do forget things sometimes." I could hear the relief in his voice. "That's what we thought. Look, why don't you come by the house tonight? We can discuss everything informally. No lawyers, just family. Sarah will make dinner." "What time?" I asked, already knowing this was the trap being set. Get me comfortable, maybe pour some wine, document my confusion with their phones, build the incompetency case they'd need. 7 o'clock. And Robert, bring the loan documents if you have them. Let's settle all of this like adults. I hung up and sat in the growing morning light, a plan crystallizing with the clarity of a well-drawn elevation. They wanted to see a confused old man? I'd give them the performance of a lifetime. But first, I needed to meet with David Park and set the real foundation. The game was on. And unlike my daughter, I'd actually studied structural engineering. I knew exactly where to place the charges to bring down a building built on lies. I met David Park at a coffee shop in Beacon Hill, far from downtown's architectural circles. He'd aged well, more gray hair, but the same passionate energy I remembered from 25 years ago. "The Urban Development Commission," I said after we'd ordered. "That's impressive, David," he smiled. "Thanks to you. That community center you designed, it became the model for Seattle's neighborhood planning initiatives. I built my entire career on what you taught me about designing for people, not developers." He leaned forward. "Now tell me what's happening." I explained everything. Sarah's firm, the loan, the demolition plan, the consulting fee designed to buy my silence. David's expression darkened with each detail. "Your own daughter," he said finally. "Robert, I'm sorry. I need to know something. Can the Cultural Center be protected? Officially?" David pulled out his tablet, fingers moving quickly. "Landmark designation. We've been updating Seattle's historic registry. Buildings 30 years or older that demonstrate architectural significance and cultural importance. He looked up. Your cultural center qualifies on every metric, but the application requires community support and a detailed historical analysis. It takes months. How many months? 4 to 6 minimum. And Robert, if there's an active purchase agreement, the commission can't intervene. Private property rights supersede preservation concerns. My heart sank. So I'm too late. Maybe not. He set down the tablet. The Foster Development, Marcus's company, they've been assembling those parcels for 18 months. That requires permits, approvals, environmental reviews. Let me check something. His fingers flew across the screen, accessing databases I didn't recognize. After 3 minutes, he stopped, his expression carefully neutral. Robert, when was Sarah's firm hired for this project? I don't know. Recently, I assume. Try 14 months ago, before they even approached you about the cultural center. He turned the screen toward me. Preliminary design approval, dated September 2022. Signed by Sarah Chen Foster, principal architect. The betrayal crystallized. Sarah had been planning to demolish my building for over a year. Every family dinner, every phone call asking about my health, every concerned message, all while secretly designing its replacement. There's more, David continued. 3 permit violations on their recent projects. Nothing major individually, but together they show a pattern. Unauthorized modifications, incomplete inspections, 1 case of building without proper approvals. He met my eyes. Robert, I can't go after them based on your complaint. Conflict of interest. But if someone filed a formal concern about permit compliance, we'd have to investigate. How long would an investigation take? Long enough to freeze their current permits, including the demolition approval they'll need for your building. He paused. But you need to understand the cost. If I open this investigation and Sarah finds out you triggered it, there's no going back. She's your daughter. I thought about Sarah in Marcus's office, unable to meet my eyes. About the consulting fee designed to buy my complicity. About 14 months of lies. She stopped being my daughter when she started planning this demolition, I said quietly. Open the investigation. That evening I drove to Sarah and Marcus's house in Madison Park, a $3.2 million craftsman they'd renovated with my loan money. I arrived at exactly 7 p.m., carrying the loan documents they'd requested. Sarah answered the door, dressed casually, the concerned daughter routine in full effect. Dad, I'm so glad you came. I made your favorite, Sichuan braised pork. The smell hit me, identical to Linda's recipe, the one Sarah had claimed she didn't remember after her mother died. Marcus appeared behind her, scotch in hand, playing the welcoming son-in-law. Robert, come in. Let's have a drink before dinner. The house tour was strategic. Every room designed to impress, to show me what my money had built for them. The chef's kitchen with its $40,000 La Cornue range, the home office with custom millwork, the primary suite with its spa bathroom. Beautiful work, I said, and meant it. The architecture was flawless. Cold, but flawless. We settled in their living room, gas fireplace providing manufactured warmth. Marcus poured 3 glasses of Macallan 18, probably $300 a bottle. He was showing off, establishing dominance through expensive hospitality. Dad, we wanted to talk about everything in a comfortable setting, Sarah began, her voice soft with practiced concern. Away from the office pressure. This is family. Is it? I asked quietly. Marcus jumped in, smooth as the scotch. Robert, we understand you're emotional about the cultural center. It represents your legacy. We respect that. He leaned forward with false intimacy. But legacies evolve. Your building served its purpose for 30 years. Now it's time for the next generation to build their legacy. By destroying mine. Not destroying. Transforming. Sarah pulled out her tablet, showing renderings I hadn't seen before. Look at this, Dad. We're incorporating design elements from the cultural center into the Jackson Tower. The facade pattern, the material palette. It's an homage. I studied the renderings. She was right. There were echoes of my design, superficial ones, the architectural equivalent of hollow flattery. Take the original soul, reduce it to decorative elements, slap it on a luxury tower, and call it respect. Linda would have understood this, Marcus said casually, and I felt the room shift. What did you say? My voice came out colder than intended. Your wife, Linda, Sarah's told me about her philosophy. Practical, forward-thinking. She would have seen that holding on to old buildings for sentiment doesn't serve anyone. He sipped his scotch. Especially when the building's becoming a financial drain. You didn't know my wife. No, but Sarah did. And she says Linda was always worried about you being too idealistic, too attached to projects that didn't make financial sense. Marcus's voice carried that edge of superiority I'd heard in our first meeting. Linda spent her life supporting your dreams while working 3 jobs to keep the family afloat. Maybe she deserved better than a husband who chose community service over providing for his family. The words detonated silently. Linda, who'd worked as a paralegal and bookkeeper to supplement my early career income, who'd supported every pro bono project, every community center, every decision to prioritize social good over profit, being used as a weapon against me by a man who'd never met her. Marcus, that's enough, Sarah said, but weakly, not really meaning it. It's the truth. Your father's idealism is admirable, Sarah, but it left your mother exhausted. It left you with student loans while he designed free buildings for communities that couldn't afford his work. Marcus turned to me, his expression showing something ugly beneath the polished surface. Robert, you had talent, real talent, but you wasted it on charity work and cultural centers that operate at a loss. If you'd prioritized properly, Linda might not have worked herself into a heart attack. I stood up, the scotch untouched, my hands steady despite the rage flooding my system. You're right about one thing. Linda worked hard. She worked hard because we chose to live with integrity instead of selling out to developers like your family. And every day until she died, she told me she was proud of what we built together. Dad, please sit down, Sarah pleaded. Marcus didn't mean, yes, he did? I looked at my daughter. And you let him. Just like you've let him plan my building's demolition for 14 months without telling me. Just like you'll let him weaponize your mother's memory if it serves your purpose. Sarah's face went pale. How did you know about the timeline? I'm an architect, Sarah. I know how to read permit records. I pulled the loan documents from my jacket. You asked for these. Here they are. $705,000 you owe me, plus interest. I want full repayment within 90 days. Marcus laughed, actually laughed. Robert, be realistic. We don't have that kind of liquid capital. The firm's assets are tied up in projects. You know that. Then I'll file a lien against Foster and Chen Design Studios. Freeze your accounts. Force asset liquidation. I turned to leave. You wanted to treat this as business instead of family? Fine. I'll show you what happens when a creditor stops being patient. You can't do that, Sarah said, her voice rising with panic. Dad, that would destroy the firm. We have payroll, overhead, project commitments. You should have thought of that before spending my money on this house and planning to demolish my life's work. I opened their front door. 90 days. Full payment, or I'll see you in court. You're making a mistake, Marcus called after me, his voice hard now, threatening. We have documentation of your mental decline. Phone recordings, emails, witnesses who will testify you've been confused and erratic. You file that lien. We'll file for guardianship. Have you declared incompetent? I turned back, smiled coldly. Try it. I've been documenting everything, too, including this conversation. Washington is a 2-party consent state for private recordings, but you invited me to a business discussion about loan repayment. That makes this a business meeting, which has different rules. I held up my phone, the recording app visible. Every threat, every manipulation, every word about my wife, all documented. The color drained from Marcus's face. Sarah stared at me like she'd never seen me before. 90 days, I repeated. And Sarah? That homage in your tower design? It's plagiarism. Every original element you copied from my cultural center is copyrighted. Use it without permission. I'll sue for intellectual property theft. I walked out into the November night, my hands shaking now with adrenaline rather than age. Behind me, I heard muffled shouting, Marcus and Sarah's first real fight playing out in the house my money had renovated. My phone buzzed. David Park. Investigation approved. All Foster and Chen permits frozen pending compliance review. Estimated timeline, 4 to 6 months. I sat in my car, watching the lights in Sarah's house, watching her perfect life start to crack. Tomorrow, I'd start the Cultural Center's landmark application. I'd submit my loan repayment demand. I'd begin the systematic demolition of everything Sarah and Marcus had built, on lies and my money. But tonight, I just felt tired and hollow, and certain that Linda would have understood why I had to do this, even as it broke me. The lawsuit arrived 3 days later via courier. Sarah and Marcus were suing me for $4.2 million, defamation, elder abuse, fraudulent loan claims, and intentional interference with business relationships. Their attorney had included a psychiatric evaluation request, asking the court to determine my mental competency. I called my lawyer, Janet Reese, who'd handled my contracts for 20 years. Her response was immediate and professionally vicious. Robert, this is desperate nonsense. We have your recording from their house, documentation of the loan. Their permit violations are public record. She paused, though I'll admit the competency angle is clever. If they can paint you as confused, they undermine everything else. So what do? Play into it. Let them think they're winning. For the next 2 weeks, I became the confused old man they'd been describing. I showed up at an AIA chapter meeting and asked rambling questions about projects completed 5 years ago. I called Sarah's office repeatedly, leaving disorganized voicemails about the loan. I sent emails with obvious typos and confused timelines. Every moment was calculated. Every confused question was scripted. I was building a trap, and Sarah and Marcus were walking straight into it. Meanwhile, David Park's investigation was moving forward quietly. He called with updates every few days, his voice careful and professional. Robert, we've found irregularities in 3 of their recent projects, structural modifications made without engineer approval. One building in Capitol Hill where they added a floor without updating the permits. He paused. There's also something interesting about their financing. Marcus's family trust has been funding the firm, but the money's been flowing through offshore accounts. Nothing illegal necessarily, but it raises questions. What kind of questions? The kind the IRS might want to ask. On December 8th, Sarah showed up at my house unannounced. She wasn't alone. Marcus was there, along with a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. I opened the door but didn't invite them in, noting how they'd parked in a way that blocked my driveway. Intimidation through logistics. Dad, we need to talk, Sarah said, her voice carrying that forced patience people use with difficult children. About what? I asked, letting a tremor into my voice. About your health, your finances, your future. Marcus gestured to the suited man. This is Gerald Hutchins, an elder care specialist. We've asked him to evaluate your living situation. Gerald stepped forward with practiced sympathy. Mr. Chen, your daughter's concerned. She's mentioned memory issues, confusion about financial matters, difficulty managing daily tasks. I manage fine, I said, deliberately fumbling with my door key. I'm sure you believe that. Gerald's voice dripped with condescension. But Mr. Chen, living alone at your age with cognitive decline, it's not safe. We've identified an excellent assisted living facility in Bellevue. Memory care wing, skilled nursing, everything you'd need. I don't need a facility. Dad, you called my office 8 times yesterday, Sarah said, showing me her phone log. You don't remember, do you? You asked the same questions about the cultural center over and over. I'd made those calls deliberately, spacing them out to seem obsessive. But I let confusion cross my face. I I thought I only called twice. Marcus and Gerald exchanged a meaningful look, building their case in real time. This is exactly what we're talking about, Marcus said, his voice gentle now, the predator showing false concern. Robert, you're not well. Let us help you before something terrible happens. Before what happens? My voice came out small, uncertain. Before you make decisions that can't be undone. Before you hurt people with accusations you don't remember making. Before... Marcus stopped, a calculated pause. Before you end up like Linda. Alone when it matters most. The room went cold. Sarah's face showed shock at Marcus crossing that line, but she didn't correct him, didn't defend me, just stood there letting her husband weaponize her mother's death again. Get out, I said, dropping the confused act entirely. Mr. Chen, I understand you're upset, Gerald began. I said, get out. All of you. Now. They left, but not before Marcus made a show of taking photos of my cluttered home office with his phone. More evidence for their incompetency case. I watched them confer in my driveway, saw Gerald typing notes on his tablet, building the medical opinion they'd need. As soon as they drove away, I called David Park. They're escalating, trying to have me declared incompetent. I know. I got a call this morning from their attorney asking about permit records. They're looking for evidence that you've been harassing city officials with confused complaints. His voice hardened. Robert, it's time. I'm making the announcement today. 2 hours later, the Seattle Times posted breaking news. Urban Development Commission opens investigation into Foster and Chen Design Studios. Multiple permit violations under review. My phone exploded. Colleagues wanting details. Former clients asking questions. 3 reporters requesting interviews. I ignored them all except one call from Patricia Morrison at the Seattle Architecture Foundation. Robert, I'm hearing disturbing things about your daughter's firm. The permit violations, the frozen projects. Is this connected to the cultural center situation? Patricia had been Linda's closest friend. She knew what that building meant to both of us. It's connected to integrity, I said carefully, or the lack thereof. Sarah called me last week, said you were experiencing cognitive problems, that you'd been making false accusations against her firm. Patricia's voice carried steel. I told her I didn't believe it, that you'd been sharp as ever at last month's foundation meeting. Was I right? You were right. Good. Because the Landmark Committee meets next week, I'm fast-tracking the Cultural Center application. We'll have it designated by New Year's. After we hung up, I sat in the study Linda and I had shared for 30 years, surrounded by blueprints and memories. Through the window, I could see the Space Needle, that monument to bold vision. Seattle had once valued architecture that took risks, that prioritized beauty and function over profit margins. My daughter had forgotten those values, or maybe I'd never taught them properly. Maybe my own obsession with perfect design had created this, a child who learned precision without compassion, ambition without ethics. The doorbell rang again. I checked the camera. Sarah, alone this time, crying on my doorstep. I almost didn't open the door, but some remnant of fatherhood made me turn the handle. She looked wrecked. Mascara smeared, hair disheveled, nothing like the polished architect from our previous meetings. They're going to fire me, she said without preamble. Marcus's family. They're pulling their funding. The frozen permits mean we can't deliver projects. We have $2.3 million in overhead and no revenue stream. Her voice broke completely. Dad, we're going to lose everything. I know, I said quietly. You knew? You planned this. No, Sarah. You planned this when you decided to demolish my building and lie about it for 14 months. I stepped aside. But come in. We should talk. She collapsed on Linda's favorite couch, the one piece of furniture I'd never been able to replace. Marcus said this was your fault, that you sabotaged us because you couldn't accept that we'd surpassed you. Is that what you believe? I don't know what I believe anymore. She looked up at me with red eyes. Dad, did I really call you 8 times yesterday? I remember calling once, maybe twice, but 8? I pulled out my phone, showed her my call log. 2 calls, both under 3 minutes. But Marcus showed me evidence. She stopped, reality crystallizing. He faked the call log, along with a lot of other things, I suspect. The competency evaluation, Gerald Hutchins, that was all. Her hands started shaking. Oh my God. Dad, what have I done? I sat beside her, close enough that our shoulders touched, the way I used to sit with her when she'd wake from nightmares as a child. You married a man who values profit over integrity, who saw my success as a threat to his. And you let him convince you that destroying my work would free you from my shadow. I paused. But Sarah, you were never in my shadow. You put yourself there by measuring your worth against mine instead of on its own merits. Mom would be so ashamed of me. Your mother would tell you that mistakes are only fatal if you don't learn from them. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording app I'd been running. Everything Marcus said today, about Linda, about having me declared incompetent, it's all documented, along with Gerald Hutchins conducting an unlicensed psychiatric evaluation. Sarah's head snapped up. You recorded that? I've been recording everything since the day you asked me to destroy my building. I showed her the files, dozens of conversations, emails, documented lies. I'm not the confused old man Marcus has been describing, Sarah. I'm the architect who taught you to document everything and plan 3 moves ahead. For the first time in months, I saw something like respect in my daughter's eyes, mixed with horror at what she'd been part of. What happens now? She whispered. Now? I stood, walked to my desk, pulled out the landmark designation paperwork Patricia had sent over. Now your cultural center demolition dies permanently. The building gets protected, and you decide whether you want to be Marcus's accomplice or my daughter. She stared at the paperwork, at her firm's name listed as the developer whose plans would be denied. If I testify about what Marcus did, about the fake evidence, your firm survives. Maybe. If you can separate yourself from him and his family's money. I'll lose everything. No, I corrected. You'll lose the things that were never really yours. The house bought with my loan, the firm funded by Marcus's family, the reputation built on demolished communities. I paused. But you might find something more valuable. Integrity, your mother's legacy, maybe even your father's respect. She cried for 20 minutes, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. I didn't comfort her. Some lessons required pain. Finally, she looked up. What do you need me to do? Tell the truth. All of it. To the Urban Development Commission, to your business partners, to yourself. She nodded slowly, stood up, moved toward the door, then stopped. Dad? The design elements in the Jackson Tower, the ones you said were plagiarism, they weren't homage at all, were they? No. They were theft dressed up as respect. That's what I've become. A thief dressed up as an architect. She opened the door. I'm going to fix this. I don't know how, but I'm going to fix it. After she left, I sat in the gathering darkness, exhausted but strangely hopeful. Tomorrow, David would release his full findings. The permits would stay frozen. The cultural center would be saved. But tonight, I'd gotten my daughter back, broken, humbled, but finally seeing clearly. Maybe that was worth more than any building. David Park's full report went public on December 15th. 16 pages documenting permit violations, unauthorized modifications, and 3 buildings constructed with forged engineer approvals. The Seattle Times ran it as front-page news. Prominent design firm under investigation for safety violations. By noon, Foster and Chen's website had crashed from traffic. By evening, 3 major clients had terminated their contracts. By the next morning, Marcus's Family Trust issued a statement distancing themselves from the firm and freezing all financial support. I watched it unfold from my home office, feeling no satisfaction, just the hollow certainty that some collapses are necessary to prevent bigger disasters. Sarah called at 2 p.m., her voice barely above a whisper. Dad, Marcus is gone. He took our savings account, $340,000, and flew to the Cayman Islands this morning. His attorney says he's not coming back unless the investigation closes. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. Don't be. You were right about everything. She took a shaking breath. I'm meeting with David Park tomorrow. I'm bringing every document Marcus told me to hide. Bank records, altered permits, communications with bribed inspectors. All of it. That will destroy what's left of the firm. The firm deserves to be destroyed. It was built on lies. Her voice steadied. But, Dad, I want to rebuild. Eventually, as just Sarah Chen architect. No foster, no family money, just me doing work I'm proud of. That's good, Sarah. That's really good. The Urban Development Commission hearing happened 3 days later. I sat in the gallery watching Sarah testify for 2 hours, detailing every violation, every forged signature, every bribe Marcus had authorized. Her voice never wavered, even when describing her own complicity. Marcus's attorney tried to paint her as a vindictive ex-wife, but the documents spoke for themselves. Emails with Marcus's name, bank transfers from accounts he controlled, photos of buildings that didn't match their approved plans. When it ended, the commission chair announced immediate suspension of all Foster and Chen permits and referral of criminal charges to the prosecutor's office. The firm was effectively finished. I met Sarah outside the hearing room. She looked exhausted, 10 years older than her 34 years. Marcus's attorney called during the break, she said. He's contesting the divorce. Says I'm not entitled to anything since I cooperated with the investigation. That I destroyed the firm's value. He'll lose. Washington is a no-fault state. I don't care about the money anymore. I just want it over. She looked at me with something like hope. Dad, the loan? The $705,000. I know I can't pay it back now, but I will. Somehow, even if it takes 20 years. I pulled an envelope from my jacket. The loan is forgiven. Paid in full as of today. What? Dad, I can't accept. You already paid it, with your testimony today, with choosing integrity over Marcus's money. I handed her the canceled loan documents. Your mother and I invested in your education, your career, your future. Consider this the same thing, an investment that paid off differently than expected. She started crying again, quieter this time. I don't deserve this. No one deserves grace, Sarah. That's why it's called grace. The Cultural Center landmark hearing happened on December 22nd. The room was packed with community members, former clients, and architecture students. Patricia Morrison presented the historical analysis, 29 years of service, architectural significance, cultural impact. The testimony was overwhelming. When it came time for public comment, 47 people spoke. Restaurant owners whose businesses started in the Cultural Center's community kitchen, musicians who'd performed their first concerts in the hall, children who'd learned to paint in the gallery. The commission voted unanimously. The Chen Cultural Center was now a Seattle historic landmark, protected permanently from demolition, my life's work secured for future generations. I walked out into the December evening past the building I'd designed 3 decades ago and felt something like peace. Linda's voice in my memory, "You built this for them, Robert. Not for recognition, not for money, for them." My phone buzzed. Janet Reese, my attorney. "Robert, Marcus's attorney just filed an emergency motion. He's suing you personally for $8 million. Claims you sabotaged his business through fraudulent complaints and manipulation of your daughter." "Let him sue? He's in the Cayman Islands. He can file from there." "Actually, he's not anymore. TSA flagged him trying to return yesterday. Apparently, offshore banking violations triggered an IRS investigation. He's being detained at SeaTac Airport." I smiled grimly. Karma works faster than I expected. The Seattle Times published their full investigative piece on January 3rd. They'd interviewed whistleblowers from Foster and Chen, reviewed city records, traced money flows. The article revealed that Marcus had been running a systematic bribery operation, paying off inspectors and commissioners for favorable permit decisions, His family trust had been funding it through shell companies, cleaning money through the architecture firm. The story went national. CNN picked it up. Architecture magazines ran editorials about ethics and oversight. Seattle's mayor promised a complete review of the permitting process. Marcus was indicted on 17 counts: bribery, fraud, money laundering, racketeering. His bail was set at $2 million. His family refused to pay it. Sarah filed for divorce the same day, citing irreconcilable differences and financial fraud. She moved into a small apartment in Georgetown, took a job at a nonprofit housing organization, and started the slow work of rebuilding her reputation. We had dinner once a week, usually at small neighborhood restaurants. Nothing fancy, just father and daughter, learning to talk without the weight of Marcus's manipulation between us. "I've been thinking about Mom a lot," Sarah said one evening in late January, "about what she'd say about all this." "What do you think she'd say?" "That I was an idiot, that I chose status over substance, that I let some man convince me my father's work was worthless." She smiled sadly. "But also that she loved me anyway. That mistakes are how we learn if we're willing to admit them." That sounds exactly like Linda. "Dad, I want to ask you something. The Beacon Hill project, the one you designed for David Park 25 years ago. Would you consider designing another community center with me as partners?" I set down my fork, studied my daughter. "Partners? Equal partners. Your experience, my energy, no profit motive. Just good design for people who need it." She pulled out a sketch on a napkin. Rough lines, but the intent was clear. Georgetown needs a community hub. The neighborhood association has land, but no money for architects. I thought maybe we could... "Yes," I interrupted. "Absolutely, yes." We spent the next hour sketching on napkins, talking over each other, arguing about load-bearing walls and sightlines and material choices, the way architecture should be practiced, the way Linda had always wanted to see us work together. When I got home, I found an email from the Seattle Architecture Foundation. They wanted to do a retrospective exhibition of my work, including the cultural center design process. Seattle's social architect, 50 years of Robert Chen, would open in May. I looked at Linda's photograph on my desk. We did it, love. Saved the building, got our daughter back, maybe taught her something worth knowing. The photo smiled back, silent and eternal. My phone buzzed one more time. David Park. "Robert, thought you should know. Marcus's family trust is being investigated by the IRS and SEC. Looks like decades of tax evasion and securities fraud. His father's going to be indicted too. The whole family empire is collapsing." I typed back, "How long will the investigation take?" "Years, but they're not going anywhere. Federal charges tend to be thorough." I set down my phone and walked to my window. Below, Seattle sparkled with possibility. The city I'd helped to shape was still evolving, still growing, still struggling between preservation and progress. My building stood at 12th and Jackson, lights glowing warm through windows I'd designed to welcome everyone. Landmark status meant it would stand for another century at least. Long after I was gone, communities would gather in spaces I'd created. That was legacy, not profits or prestige, just good design in service of human needs. Marcus had learned that lesson the hard way. So had Sarah. Me? I'd learned that some things are worth fighting for, even when the cost is devastating, especially then. Tomorrow, Sarah and I would start the Georgetown project. Not for money, not for recognition, for the same reason I designed the Cultural Center 30 years ago, because architecture at its best is about creating space for people to become fully human. Linda would have approved. 6 months later, I stood in the Georgetown Community Center's unfinished shell, watching Sarah explain foundation details to the construction crew. She'd cut her hair short, traded in designer suits for work boots and flannel, and smiled more than I'd seen in years. "Dad, come look at this," she called, gesturing to the main gathering space. I think we nailed the acoustics. I joined her in the center of the room, our voices echoing off bare concrete. She was right. The proportions created natural amplification without harsh reverb. Good instinct, better than mine at her age. Your mother would love this, I said quietly. I know. I've been reading her journals, the ones you gave me after she died that I never opened. Sarah's voice caught. She wrote about wanting us to design something together. She called it Bridging Generations Through Blueprints. That sounds like Linda, always more poetic than either of us. We stood in comfortable silence, the kind that had taken months to rebuild. After Marcus's arrest, Sarah had spent 3 months in intensive therapy, working through what her counselor called prolonged manipulation and financial abuse. The divorce finalized in March. Marcus was still in federal custody, facing trial for 17 counts of fraud and bribery. I got a letter from him last week, Sarah said suddenly. Marcus, from jail. He apologized, said he loved me, asked if I'd testify as a character witness. What did you say? I said no. That love doesn't manipulate. That love doesn't weaponize dead mothers or gaslight fathers. That whatever he felt for me, it wasn't love. She looked at me. Then I thanked him. For what? For showing me the difference between the architect I was becoming and the architect I want to be. She pulled out her phone, showed me a photo. This is my new office. 1 room above a coffee shop in Georgetown. No reception area. No Herman Miller chairs. Just me, a drafting table, and clients who need affordable housing design. The office looked nothing like Foster and Chen's glass palace. It looked real, honest, like the woman my daughter was becoming. I'm proud of you, I said. Don't be. Not yet. She put away her phone. Dad, I need to apologize. Really apologize. Not the crying on your doorstep kind. The taking responsibility kind. Sarah, let me finish. Please. She took a breath. I chose Marcus's ambition over your integrity. I let him convince me that your work was outdated, that community service was failure, that profit margins mattered more than people. I betrayed everything you and Mom taught me. And when you fought back, I called you senile. I tried to have you declared incompetent. I helped to plan the demolition of your masterpiece. I know. I was there. But here's what I'm realizing now in therapy. Part of why Marcus's manipulation worked was because I'd spent my whole life trying to earn your approval through perfect designs and prestigious projects. You never said I had to be the best, but I felt it. This pressure to be worthy of being Robert Chen's daughter. The words hit harder than expected. I sat on a stack of lumber, suddenly needing support. I did that? I asked quietly. Not intentionally. You loved me. You supported me. But Dad, when I showed you my designs, you'd point out every flaw, every measurement that could be optimized, every material choice that wasn't quite right. You were teaching me excellence, but what I learned was that nothing I did would ever be good enough. I thought about Sarah at 8 years old, showing me a drawing of a house, how I'd spent 20 minutes explaining proper structural proportions instead of just saying it was beautiful. About every school project I'd critiqued instead of celebrated. About making her an architect before she decided if she wanted to be one. I'm sorry, I said, my voice rough. I thought I was preparing you for a difficult profession, teaching you the standards clients would demand. But I was really just recreating how my own father raised me, with perfectionism instead of praise. I know, Mom told me. She said your father never once told you he was proud of you, that you spent your whole career trying to earn approval from a man who'd been dead for 20 years. Linda said that in her journals. She wrote that she worried we'd continue the cycle, that you'd push me the way your father pushed you, that I'd push my children the same way. Sarah smiled sadly. Guess we don't have to worry about that last part. Marcus made sure I never want to trust anyone enough to have kids. You're 34. That could change. Maybe. Right now, I'm focused on becoming someone a child would be lucky to have as a mother. Someone who values integrity over image. Someone like Mom. She paused. Someone like the father I'm finally getting to know. We spent the rest of the afternoon working side by side, adjusting door frames and arguing about window placement. Real work. The kind Linda used to say was better than therapy because it produced both perspective and shelter. As the sun set, Sarah gathered her tools and turned to me with careful formality. Dad, I have something to ask. The Seattle Architecture Foundation contacted me about your retrospective. They want to include a section on our collaborative work, the Georgetown project, plus a written piece about what we've learned from each other. What did you tell them? That I needed to ask my partner first. She smiled. So, partner, what do you think? I think your mother would say we're finally getting it right. The retrospective opened in May, 2 days after my 63rd birthday. Seattle's social architect. 50 years of Robert Chen filled 3 galleries with drawings, models, and photographs. The Cultural Center occupied the largest space, showing the evolution from initial sketches to landmark designation. But it was the final gallery that made me cry. Restoration, a father-daughter collaboration. Our Georgetown project, side by side with Linda's journal entries about hoping we'd work together someday. Sarah had designed the exhibit herself, weaving our story with our architecture. The opening was packed. David Park gave a speech about how my community centers had shaped Seattle's neighborhood planning for 3 decades. Patricia Morrison talked about Linda's support of my pro bono work. Former clients shared stories of buildings that had changed their lives. Then Sarah spoke about Marcus, about betrayal, about the long road back to integrity, about learning that legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you teach others to value. My father showed me that some things are worth fighting for even when the cost is devastating, she said, her voice steady. He saved a building, but more importantly, he saved his daughter, and taught me that true architecture isn't about impressive structures. It's about creating spaces where people can become their best selves. She looked directly at me. Dad, thank you for not giving up on me, even when I'd given up on myself. The gallery erupted in applause. I stood there crying unashamedly, Linda's memory surrounding me, Sarah's integrity restored, the work we'd built together finally meaning what it should have meant all along. After the ceremony, Sarah and I walked to the Cultural Center. It was hosting a community concert, the space filled with music and laughter and life. We stood outside, looking at the building through gathering dusk. Mom's right there, isn't she? Sarah said softly. In every line. Every choice you made. She's in every building I designed after meeting her. Teaching me that architecture is about people, not awards. About service, not status. I paused. And she's in you, Sarah. In your choice to rebuild with integrity. In your work for nonprofits instead of luxury developers. In every time you choose community over profit. I hope so. I'm trying to deserve her memory. You already do. By being honest about your mistakes. By doing the hard work of becoming someone she'd be proud of. I put my arm around her shoulders. Your mother used to say that buildings tell stories about the people who design them. What story do you want your work to tell? She thought for a moment, watching concert-goers stream into the cultural center. That I learned from my mistakes. That I chose restoration over demolition. That I finally understood what my father and mother tried to teach me. That the best architecture serves humanity, not ego. That's a good story. It's your story too, Dad. You could have destroyed me. Could have let Marcus take me down with him. Instead, you saved me. Even when I didn't deserve it. That's what fathers do. What architects do. We build foundations strong enough to survive storms. And when storms damage the structure, we restore instead of demolish. We stood there as night fell over Seattle, father and daughter, architects both, finally understanding that the best designs aren't the ones that impress, they're the ones that endure. My phone buzzed. David Park. Robert, the city council just approved funding for 3 more community centers in underserved neighborhoods. They want Chen and Chen architects to design them. You interested? I showed Sarah the message. She grinned. Chen and Chen architects. Has a nice ring to it. It does. Should we accept? Only if we work pro bono. Mom would want it that way. She absolutely would. We walked home through the city we'd helped build, past buildings that would outlive us both, carrying Linda's legacy forward into a future where architecture served people instead of profit, where fathers and daughters designed together, where mistakes could be restored instead of hidden. It wasn't the story I'd planned when Sarah first told me to demolish my life's work, but it was better, more honest, more human. Linda would have approved, and really that was the only blueprint that ever mattered. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Robert's position? Let us know where you're listening from.